elections, Kepsa sought a song that Kenyans identified with to run the Kenya Daima campaign.
In 0708, the big lesson was we were casual. We said politics never affects business. Of course, that's how many people would argue. The politicians will do their thing, be okay, until we woke up and realized, wow, how divided we are as a nation. And therefore, that realization dawned on us. And we said we are going to start an event called Kenya Daima.
Tushangilie Kenya, taifa letu tukufu, Kenya tunayoipenda.
And what is Kenya Daima about? Is by saying, mimi si mwananchi, mimi ni mwenye nchi. Because when you say you are mwananchi, that is philosophy of the 60s. You are a child of the nation. That's what it literally translates to. But I'm the owner of my own country. When you own something, you can't burn your own house. I can't just go and attack somebody else. That's national spirit. That patriotism really needs to come to the fore. And that's why national security is important. It's the foundation of business.
The government alone cannot provide security. Security is a role of everyone. Kepsa has played majorly in the current reforms that is going on in the sector. Look at the police sector. Another very important role that Kepsa is doing is the current security regulatory bill. As you know, the industry, especially the private security, has not been regulated, and now Kepsa is coming up together with the other players to make the regulatory bill take reform.
The previous constitution gave the government a free hand in everything. Roadside declarations were common, thus making the environment unstable for long-term investors. The new constitution inspired a major change in thinking across the board.
The new constitution.
The current constitution, as it is, has a lot of room for dialogue, and the processes that have been set up with the current constitution also allows for private sector engagement directly with all organs of government. So that is why we were very keen to get the new constitution in place, because without that we would not have had the political peace that we sought for the future.
The expansion in free primary and secondary education was backed up by the larger expansion of university education in Kenya's history. In 10 years, the university enrollment rose from 75,000 students in 2002 to over 250,000 in 2012.
One of the major benefits private schools got via Kepsa is when the new laws were being passed to align education to the new constitution. Kepsa was able to push the ministry, and then Kenya Private Schools Association was able to present views which were taken into account when the new education bill law was passed, when the new Teacher Service Commission bill was passed. We were listened to, and our views were accepted almost entirely. And therefore now the new education laws are very friendly to private schools.
Our economic transformation depends highly on training. We all know and appreciate that as a nation we have a national vision 2030, and this is highly determined by how we as a nation collaborate together towards enhancing the overall development of education.
Matatu, or rather public transport industry, which is famously mentioned as Matatu, has had its history, a terrible history. It's an area where initially it attracted the bad boys. What I mean by the bad boys are people who had dropped out of school. We had people who would scout for passengers, despite the fact that people knew where they were traveling to. At one time, vehicles didn't even require insurance. So it was, related to so many bad things. There was no order at all. We thought the best way was to institutionalize by forming institutions that would be corporate, so that you don't deal with individuals, you deal with institutions. The investment surpasses 50 billion. So it's not informal at any moment. It's an enterprise.
A lot of changes have happened. One of them is the expansion of the infrastructure. So the road capacity certainly has improved. Number two is that there has been a policy change, especially in land transport. For the first time, Kepsa's lobbying, a transport policy has been formulated and adopted. And for the first time, there is a National Transport and Safety Authority, a land transport regulator and manager that has never been. When we go to the airlines, you will notice that all airports were managed as individual. Now all airports now are managed by Airports Authority. We have seen the expansion of Jomo Kenyatta Airport. We have seen the expansion of Kisumu Airport. And when we go to marine, there was no marine authority. Now we have what we call the Maritime Authority that as a policy and a regulator has come in force. It is through the lobbying of Kepsa, through people like Manu Chandaria, the founder of Kepsa, that now we can talk about the standard gauge rail, which is just about to start being built using funds from China.
Then there's of course the Lapsset corridor, which the government started last year. We are expecting that that project within the next 10 years will have already been started properly and completed. And you know, within that project there is the Lamu port, which will be one of the biggest ports in Africa because it has a very deep berth.
The last 10 years has been quite a revolution in the industry, especially when you talk about logistics. All of that has been instrumental in moving to where we are today in terms of single territory for the Northern Corridor, the single window coming up now with all the bodies which will be able to interact on one platform. We have been with Kepsa since inception, and now of course we are also concentrating on transit cargo, which is where the single territory system is coming in.
The thing that has made a lot of difference is the investments in infrastructure. That at least did help to reduce some of the costs. We as KAM have worked with Kepsa and its partners when it was necessary. I am particularly happy about the decisions around expansion of the market, both in ESC and COMESA, and support to try and get into those markets. The decision in 2007 to sign the framework agreement on economic partnership agreements at least enabled us to continue selling into Europe duty-free and quota-free for the last 7 years, so that at least has been positive.
These highways, roads, airports and airstrips have all had a major positive impact on international and domestic tourism, resulting in increased arrivals for each of these regions. The refurbishment of various airports will also be a major boost to tourism.
Kenya's services sector, which contributes about 63% of GDP, is dominated by tourism. Between 2003 and 2013, the industry saw new hotels in the 3 to 5 star category built in Nairobi, attracting international and local guests.
We've seen, of course, a lot of changes because of the infrastructure that has been put into place. Some of these things, and including other policy initiatives within the housing sector and the land sector, such as an incentive that we've lobbied for and we got for low-income housing that allows developers to get credits and tax incentives for building houses below a certain cost. So as a result of all of this, we've seen the housing industry boom, and I think all Kenyans know this and have felt it somehow or the other. What was basically a very sluggish economy, we started seeing a growth in the early years of the administration at about 14%, over 10% every year of increased value coming from our sector.
The real estate market in Kenya has outperformed most other asset classes over the last 10 years. By 2010, the construction sector was approximated to have created 82,000 private sector jobs. Kenya's real estate sector is one of the most vibrant and profitable in the world today.
We say that our industry is very important because when somebody has a house, it's not just an investment, it's also a stake that they have in the country, a place that is a basis for capital accumulation for families, and we want everybody to own a little piece of Kenya.
Land management has also witnessed transformation. With lessons learned from past years, policies have been developed and implemented to safeguard private and public land from misappropriation.
We can say we've noticed the whole issue of land allocations, and let's say less than above board land allocations have virtually disappeared. If you recall, we had issues like Karura Forest, there was things in Kitale, there was a lot of government land disappearing, and that has really come to an end. Right now, I'd say we're in transition stage, and so we're in a critical stage, and hopefully Kepsa will continue to recognize what the private sector needs to do and be useful for the private sector to continue.
One of the challenges we've had in this country is that our forest cover, I think, is very, very low. This has, of course, accelerated the problem of climate change. I mean, this country would have no trees today if the kind of deforestation we saw going on in the past continued. We've seen people, squatters being removed from the forests. We've seen alternative land being looked for them. Mount Kenya, Aberdares, the Mau, all these, there have been efforts to preserve them. And all this is aimed, of course, at reducing the impact of climate change. And I think there's been a lot of effort in seeking alternative energy sources, wind, solar, power. So we are very hopeful that when all these things come on stream, they're going to benefit us tremendously. And we're going to also be able to have a more stable climate, reduce the effects of global warming, because the forests will be maintained.
That is the substation. You can see the transformer right there. And behind.
Talking about from 2003, for example, a lot of changes has taken place in the energy sector. We are in the Energy Act of 2006, which completely reformed the energy sector by introducing competitive rates into the sector. It became possible to create various bodies to take care of energy. One of them, of course, is to have focus on renewable energies, which was not there before. Again, it created ability for generating companies to sell directly to consumers rather than going through the Kenya Power Lighting Company. So these changes came about, and these have been quite major in encouraging private participation in the whole sector of energy.
And all of you clap when they're Kenya daima, sauti ya mama. Amen. Amen.
In the 10 years, having all these programs in place, I now see a robust women in business movement coming in and saying, hello, this is where we want to be in this business. We want to be board members of Kenya Invest. We want to probably have the 2/3 representation in the Export Promotion Council. And I know that is the government is doing a lot in terms of procurement.
For instance, with the public procurement, what this does is that there's a shift. There's going to be 200 billion moving into the pockets of women and youth if the uptick of the public procurement goes as planned. What this means is that the person who did not have access to this money now has access to it. And what that means is that it increases your spending power. It means you have access to better healthcare because you have money in your pocket. So basically you can choose where to go to the hospital, where to take your children to school. So that's what we want. We want the money to be in everybody's pockets.
Through what you'd call the private-public dialogue, we in the health sector, we've been able to engage under very difficult circumstances, because you must remember, we had 2 ministries of health where there was almost duplication at every level. You had the associations for health professionals, like the doctors, pharmacists. They had, and they still do have, their own associations. We have what we call the PPPHK, and that is Public-Private Health Kenya, which brings together the government, commercial enterprise, and the social enterprise.
The growth of the economy up to 7.1% meant that there was a growth in middle class. The middle class are the ones who sustain, for us, the middle class hospitals, so to speak. And therefore, their health-seeking behavior, you find that they have extra disposable income to be able to afford to pay for health insurance and to be able to seek for proper health care.
In the first years after independence, the Chamber played a very significant role in deepening the government's agenda with the private sector. Over the years, wrangles for leadership, weak memorandum of articles of association and mismanagement ruined the organization. This led to a membership that did not have clear vision for the business agenda.
Kepsa led the initiative to revise the memorandum and articles of association of the Chamber
And it really was the beginning of the revived Chamber of Commerce, because we had now a robust set of legal infrastructure, which is what we're working on. It was agreed that Kepsa would be the point of contact with government, but that the Chamber of Commerce would take leadership in the economic diplomacy agenda. We've received very, very many trade missions into Kenya this year, and we've also led several high-profile trade missions overseas. We led 88 business people to China, working with Kepsa. We've led trade missions into Slovakia, to Dubai, to the United Kingdom, and we've also received several high-level economic missions, including Nigeria.
It is indeed inspiring to see what can be achieved when we put aside our personal interests to work on developing our country. Without the many personal hours put aside by the founding members of Kepsa, Kenya would not be where it is today as a country.
I had to take a 3 months leave, sabbatical, from my office, unpaid, to put time to see a day that the private sector be united.
Kenya is my country to begin with, and so my involvement is basically more private than anything else.
And if you have the skill, if you have the time, and I had the time, but I had to negotiate with my employers at the time that I was going to take about 15% of my time working in the public arena.
The vision lives on, and the mantle has been changing hands every 2 years, with every chair building on what was established in 2003 with the same spirit of building our nation. We all have different opinions on where we think Kenya would be.
Wow, if we had Kepsa from independence to now, I'm sure we'll be back to back with Singapore.
We would actually be giving aid to other African countries.
I believe that we've lost 40 years of opportunity in Kenya.
We had to go through the churn of people learning what to do, what not to do. Had we been born 50 years ago, I think we might have become a bit more stale.
What's important is not to look back. What's important is to look forward.
Looking at the history of our nation, we will realize that this was the best time to have Kepsa. Kenya has since grown as a nation. What we all agree on is that the next 10 years look bright.
The infrastructure sector will be such a massive sector that it is difficult to imagine.
I think the next 10 years is more about monitoring, because the laws have been put in place.
You've seen cameras coming in Nairobi. We are working, I think, on the National Electronic Driving License.
We've got Nobel Peace Laureates. We conquer the marathon. We are a software IT hub. We have the best weather on earth. God put us on the equator. We can reach anywhere in Africa in 5 hours. We have a route to the sea. So all these gifts, surely, we can't waste them.
Clearly, we have seen Kenya coming of age and now ready to be recognized as one of the lions of Africa. Kepsa is proud to have influenced the growth of the Kenyan economy for the past 10 years. We are also proud of what our nation has achieved during its 50 years of existence and look forward to a prosperous Kenya.
President Uhuru, one of the first organizations that he met